Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. This is Lorenzo, and this episode is part 11 of the 11-part series that Chris and I have been discussing around leadership questions that can be asked during an interview. First and foremost, Chris and I would like to thank all of our Patreon members for your support throughout 2021, and we also like to thank all of our listeners for all the support that all of you have shown us as well in regards to downloads, listens, questions, reaching out, providing support, sharing our podcast, sharing our posts. It really has been a tremendous year for the podcast as we've continued to grow, take on new partnerships, and continue to add and adjust our content strategy to do what's best for all of our listeners. We really enjoyed this 11-part series specifically because, most episodes have been around 10, 11 minutes long, which happens to work really well for most people during the holidays. But we are really excited about kicking off 2022 with more content, more interviews, and more different takes on leadership with different guests and different topics and different formats that we want to have in regards to making sure that we're engaging leaders from all different parts of the world and all different parts of industries that have really unique perspectives in leadership and really are looking to help support leaders out there, whether you're just beginning your career or you've been a leader for a long time looking to continue to sharpen your skill set. So when I think about recapping these 10 episodes that we had, there's really 4 things that I want to talk about. In how are you assessing whether or not somebody would be a good leader for your organization or would be a good leader to work for you if you are a leader of leaders. So the first thing I want you to really consider when asking any question at all, as you're thinking about potentially bringing somebody on, is does the candidate have the skill necessary to succeed? I really want you to consider and think about somebody's experience, somebody's skill set. Do you hear them talk about specific skill sets? Do you hear them, explain in their answers the ability to observe things, the ability to take action on things, the ability to take ownership of certain situations, and really having this feeling of having been developed or having a good amount of experience to be able to have the skill necessary to succeed with a team. Now, there's all different types of skills that you can have in leadership, and there's all different types of tenure or experience that a candidate might have. So it's okay to be on the front end of somebody's career. It's okay for you to see skill where maybe they have just started to really utilize it, or they have the right instincts, but maybe they haven't had all of the experience yet to apply that skill into all different types of experiences. But you really need to consider, do they have the skill necessary to succeed for the role that you're thinking about? The second question I want you to think about and make sure you're assessing for is, does the candidate live the values you want in your organization? It's so important to make sure that leaders that you bring on not only share common values by saying that these things are important to them, but do you hear that in their answers? Are they able to articulate how those values come to life every day for them? Are they able to articulate times when maybe their values have been tested and they had to push back, they had to go a different direction, they had to provide feedback to maybe a superior or someone else in the organization that was maybe difficult or required a lot of courage for them, but you really want to listen for, do they live the values, not just know them and say them. I think many times we get into dialogue and conversations and we talk to people and they say what they think that we want to hear, or you hear a lot of the same key phrases and words or things that are important to people. I want to build trust with people. I want to create a psychologically safe environment. I want to make sure that I lead with integrity and clarity and these types of things. A lot of people have read a lot of books, seen a lot of videos, watched a lot of TED Talks, and have seen a lot of different ways that values are promoted amongst organizations. And so they know the key words. They know what to say. What you need to assess is, are they actually living them? Do you hear those values in the decisions they make? Do you hear those values in the examples they give? Do you hear those values really coming to life? And again, especially in times when maybe those values have been tested, that's such a critical part of truly understanding and assessing the leadership capability of an individual as you make a decision. Before I share the next 2 questions that I want you to consider, we'll take a quick break from a word from our sponsors. Okay, the final 2 questions that I want you to consider when having a leadership interview and asking different types of questions is, does the candidate have specific examples of positive leadership impact? I love when people talk about theory and leadership theory. A lot of our podcasts, we talk about leadership theory. We talk about things that are good examples or stories or analogies or ways of explaining what good leadership is, or how we want to be a leader, or how we've seen leadership in other places and how that applies to what we do. But what you really want to assess for, do people have specific examples? Like, are you talking about names? Do you have, dates and times? Are the examples that they're sharing very, very specific and very real, so that you can best understand not only the leadership impact they had on their people or their other leader, but kind of pulling back to the previous questions, like how do those values come to life as well? And I think sometimes we get into interview processes and we ask questions, and then we hear a lot of the buzzwords, or we hear things like, this is kind of what I think about leadership, and I look at it this way. I think the best leaders are a coach, and when I think about how I, coach my teams, these are the things that I do. But it's kind of vague, and it's the idea of leadership. And what you really want to hear from an individual is saying things like, well, let me give you an example of an employee named Chris. And, I met Chris at this point in time, or I started working with Chris at this point in time, and these are the things that I noticed that we talked about. These are the things that I helped coach him on. Here's the examples that I provided for him. Here's how I share some of my own personal testimony and stories and examples and mistakes to help Chris build the confidence to be successful in his role. And as a result of that, Chris has been able to do A, B, and C, and be able to be successful with this. And then, a conversation that he and I had the other day was him thanking me for that, or explaining to me this, and this is what I learned from Chris as he's now taken on these expectations. Like, those types of things are very specific, and they provide an opportunity to truly assess whether or not somebody's actually having a positive leadership impact beyond the idea of what they would do to have a positive leadership impact, or what they believe positive leadership impacts actually are. And then the final thing I want you to consider is, does the candidate find joy in being responsible for developing people? For me, this is maybe one of the biggest things that I'm looking for when it comes to assessing leaders and interviewing leaders. Do they actually find joy in being responsible for developing people? When you see the spark in their eye, when they talk again about the specifics of the examples they have, they have their values come to life every single day. They have this skill necessary to be successful in the role. Does this bring them joy? Do they sit up a little bit taller? Do they start to smile when they give these examples and share these stories of the people that they've worked with? Do they almost feel sentimental in regards to thinking about the success their people have had, or the experience they've been able to create as a leader? Do they talk about that responsibility? Do they talk about times when maybe they didn't get the result they wanted with an individual, and it frustrated them because they wanted it so bad for this person, and they were willing to provide them with whatever they needed to be successful, and yet it just didn't happen. So when I talk about finding joy and being responsible, it's more than just saying I find joy in watching people succeed, because that's not a very clean and easy path. Most of the time it has a lot of hurdles. Most of the time it has a lot of ups and downs that causes frustration. There can be, good days, good weeks, bad weeks. And sometimes, quite frankly, it ends where the person that you spent a lot of time with and invested in, they weren't successful in a role, or they ended up leaving the organization, or maybe they had too many mistakes in a row where they weren't able to correct those and find success in moving forward. But to truly find joy in being responsible for developing people, that should be really easy to read, and it shouldn't be where sometimes people will be dismissive, or they'll feel frustrated, or they'll say things like, well, just most people don't want to work that hard, but these people did. Like, do they have this whole kind of take on how they view people, and is it in a negative connotation, or do they find joy and they see all the positives and everything, but then they feel like they're sharing frustration because it didn't work out, or they wanted it more than the person wanted it for themselves? So those are the four things, and again, I'll recap them quickly here. Does the candidate have the skill necessary to succeed? Does the candidate live the values that you want in your organization? Does the candidate have specific examples of positive leadership impact? And does the candidate find joy in being responsible for developing people? So I think if you consider those 4 things while you're interviewing your candidates, regardless of whatever questions you're asking, I think this will be really, really helpful in finding success. And I think it'll be really helpful in making sure that you're assessing leadership talent in a way that provides you, an opportunity to hire somebody fantastically great. So, and with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you all next time.